Uh, I'm Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller.
And listen, we really have no one to blame for this but ourselves. Probably mostly me, if we're being honest.
I was gonna say, I'll accept maybe 20% of the blame for this one.
You let me do it. This is a joint. It takes two to tango. It takes two to podcast. You let me say what I said. You could have said no. We could have retaken that. Jackson, I don't want to tell this to the audience, but I'm going to tell it to you. Podcasts are pre-recorded and I edit them. We can take this as many times as we want.
It's true.
But still, y'all chose Postal, and we watched Postal.
We sure did.
I don't want to talk about this movie, and I think that's the most damning thing I can say about it. Because we have come into some serious stinkers, some seriously bad movies, but we've come into it still willing to talk about it. This is a movie that we spent our pre-discussion clamoring for anything at all to talk about, so we wouldn't have to talk about Postal.
And we really were the architects of our own discussion because we just hung out in a Discord call the day before, so we couldn't even give life updates or anything because we already knew. We already knew what was going on.
So we just sat around and quietly discussed things that we were looking at on our computer, which I stalled for about 10 minutes, and then we had to do it. We have to talk about Postal.
Well, let me say this. I'll say this much. Because this is perhaps the only thing that Postal made me seriously think about. I can think of only two things, and the first is that we've had an ongoing discussion over whether it's better to be whether it's worse rather to be bored by a movie or absolutely enraged and offended by a movie. I think I can definitively say I would rather be enraged, because although I wasn't that mad at Postal, because it's honestly not even worth getting mad about. It's so nakedly obvious what it's doing. And
it is 2008 shock humor in the most naked, boring way possible. It doesn't even challenge the shock humor bar. I don't even want... Listen, I was thinking about talking about what's in the movie, and I just don't want to. I don't want to dignify the movie with that to explain the shock humor of it.
But bro, isn't that just showing that the movie's doing its job?
No, it's not. No. I'm sorry. I'm trying. Listen. Let me get behind the curtain again, just to talk to Jackson. I understand that the way podcasts work is we're supposed to kind of riff off each other, and there's a little bit of improv in podcasts where you have to yes and work with each other. This movie doesn't make me want to do that, and I'm sorry. I'm trying my best.
Sean, I know you're doing your best here, and I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you, fam.
Well, I appreciate you too. I'm so happy that we're still doing this. We've been doing this for a while. It's great. It's wonderful. I'm happy. Listen, you know what? Let's just take a moment and be thankful for the fact that we got to a point where we did Postal on this podcast, because that's a crazy thing. Had you told me a year, 2 years, 2.5 years ago, it's almost been 3 years, I think, of this podcast. No, 2 years? I don't know. It's been a lot. We've done a lot of episodes of this podcast. The point I'm trying to make here is that if you had told us that hey, you guys would do this for 120 some episodes and then talk about Uwe Boll's Postal, I wouldn't have believed it. So I'm thrilled that we're here. This is a wonderful thing, and I'm happy I can be doing it with you.
I'm thrilled too. I feel like doing this show with you, it makes me grow as a film watcher. It makes me grow as a person. The Horsecast is a great fucking time.
It is. It's been wonderful to talk to you, when we were separated by distances and everything like that. So it was nice to have a weekly way to catch up with someone important to me in my life. It was nice, especially because we're both really bad at keeping in touch with people. So the trick is to conscript people into doing podcasts with you so they have to talk to you every week. And then voila, you have a reason to talk to people. Big brain plays.
Big brain plays, making that content, making that cheddar.
Kind of. We got a Patreon too.
We got a Patreon. So you know, I mean, I get it. I get it, fam. We're at a challenging hour in our careers talking about Uwe Boll's Postal.
Well, listen, we've had a really nice discussion. We've really kind of grown. We've talked about how we've grown as people, and I think that's going to do it for us this week. We've had a.
Oh.
It's not going to do it for us. Well, we have to talk at least a little bit about it. I can probably work myself up into some sort of a tizzy just because as we've explained last week, I've kind of got a better grasp on Uwe Boll than anyone reasonably should at this point. So, like, I have thoughts about this movie and his ideologies, and I probably can get mad about that. But Jackson, you can keep talking about it first.
So I'll say two things. I only have 2 points, and I think the most damnable thing about the movie is what you said, that even by the standards of like shock value, like it's not even good at being that, because it's, you know, this was pretty par for the course in terms of like edgy 2008 stuff. Now, I will say that by nature of even thinking about like the philosophy of like movies and like stuff for shock value's sake, and even thinking about this, I think I have to put this above Alone in the Dark, because it made me like, even if it was awful, and it was mostly boring, like this did feel very long for a lot of reasons. It had that. It made me think about a thing, which is more than I could say about Alone in the Dark, which the only, you know, we're a week out from that, and the only thing I remember about it is the hilarious heavy metal shootout scene.
I remember the Indiana Jones scene really well for some reason. That's about all I remember from it. I remember that better than the heavy metal shootout, actually.
But the overall point is that I think I would take something, even something detestable, over nothing. And Alone in the Dark is nothing. I'm too old to waste my time on nothing these days. So that's possibly the only point of praise I can give the movie. It's not saying a lot. It's really not. Because I think that the worst thing is that, you know, it's based off of trashy source material. It's based off of Postal. You know, we kind of talked a little bit about this last week, how Uwe Boll, he didn't adapt video games for like, whatever particular prestige they had. He adapted them because they were there and they were topical. And so Postal, the game, I was thinking about this, and that there's a reason for Postal, the game, to exist. It's not a game that like I would ever have any interest in going back and playing, and like even from like intellectual curiosity, I just don't care. But like there is a genuine reason for something like, particularly in a young medium, to kind of push the boundaries for boundary pushing sake, if only because that precedent opens up like smarter and better creators to like actually come do something and feel a little more emboldened. So like the example that I like to go back to is that like South Park in the 90s, when like South Park first arrived, like that was genuinely like challenging and boundary pushing. And partially because it did have a genuine kind of like fuck you, like spirit, like almost like indie spirit, and you know, it ended up being very popular, ended up resonating with people, and you know, then South Park became the establishment, and no longer does it have that sort of value. But because South Park existed, we have other shows. Like even if you're just looking at the realm of like animated comedies, like I don't think Rick and Morty exists without South Park, right? And that's like a show that's a million times better than South Park ever was, even at its peak. But I don't think that without those boundaries being pushed, I don't think that would exist. I think that in increasing the scope of that of like what you can do like as a writer and as an artist, I think there is some value in that. The real and so that brings me back to Postal the game before I go into the real problem with Postal the movie, is that Postal the game, like when it came out, that it's very much the same thing, like from what I understand, full disclosure, I've never played it, don't intend to, but like very much just kind of like shock for shock's sake, like dumb, stupid humor, edgy, mean spirited bullshit.
Here's a quick question for you. I just, this is unrelated to anything you're talking about, but I'm just curious. Did you watch the unrated or the rated version?
I think I watched the unrated version. I think that's what Amazon said.
Okay, I was gonna say Amazon had both versions available, and I was just curious because the unrated version really wasn't even that much shocking in the unrated glory of it all.
Yeah, so. I didn't even realize it was unrated. I was a little bit it was a little shocking to see someone hanging dong, but only because movies never do that, not because it was a dog.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Postal the game would have come out at a time where like video games like was still establishing whether or not it could be a medium for like expression, and like if you could like push the boundaries and stuff, and there was all sorts of controversy and like the possibility of like state censorship, which is bad, and it played a small role in getting to games where they are now, which is overall, like, the games are certainly not perfect, heaven knows, but overall I'd say we are in a more like sophisticated place with a broader range of like what game developers can do. So that's what I see as like there is some value in being shocking and pushing the boundaries kind of for its own sake, right? But, and this is a big but, in order for that to be true, like there needs to be some sort of like authority that you are pushing against that is like actually standard. You actually have to be breaking the mold in some way or another. Like you have to be sort of genuine in your intents. I think that's what resonated back in the 90s about like early South Park, is this genuine sort of like feeling of like anger or resentment at like sort of cookie cutter like media and like televised comedy and stuff. The problem with Postal the film, one of its many problems, is that, as we said, none of this is especially surprising given the material, and film is not really in the position where it needs to like prove itself or like expand beyond the boundaries. Like that's
Pink Flamingos exists.
Yeah, exactly. Like we've already done this. And so what's left is the very like nakedly cynical Uwe Boll movie. And so that's what we're left with Postal. And it's as bad of an experience as you expect it to be, if not worse.
So here's kind of my perspective on this, because the boring versus shocking debate has long since raged, and Jackson tends to take the side of boring. I think is worse, which is what you're stating here as well.
I've gone back and forth, but I think this is like I've wavered a bit here and there. Like certain movies have made me question this, but I think that's ultimately where I'm planting my flag. Is that from my perspective, there is nothing in this world that I hate more than having my time wasted, and I can think of no greater waste of my time than watching a movie or like playing a game that is just like completely flatline, doesn't even like make me think. Like even if I'm mad, if I remember a movie later, like that's something. It had some sort of impact on me. That's basically my stance.
So here's where I'm going to come in and say that I think Postal was worse than Alone in the Dark, because I could remember the Indiana Jones scene from Alone in the Dark. Meanwhile, I watched Postal 6 hours ago, and already most of that movie has been scrubbed from my brain, and by tomorrow, the entire thing will be gone. And that's not to say that it's not shocking. That's not to say that it's not, outrageous. Oh, they're at it again. Watch out. But it's so nakedly outrageous and they're at it again. I have the vapors. Hold me, please. That I very quickly went, yep, okay, I know what this is, and just basically tuned it out. And the result of tuning out that shock factor was the most boring, blasé, nothing of a movie I have ever watched. Alone in the Dark was at least doing some stuff with some of its set pieces, not really successfully and not really, interestingly, but there was some stuff. Like, you could see homages and references and influences throughout it. Whereas this is just, what if we got people to say slurs and then shot them? And that's the entirety of the movie, and that's nothing. That's not funny, that's not clever, that's not inspiring. There's no really place to track it back to previous things. It is the biggest nothing I have perhaps ever watched, and I look forward to forgetting about it in its entirety as soon as I possibly can.
That is fair.
That said, it is also peak Uwe Boll, and this is where I'm going to talk a little bit about how I understand the psychology of Uwe Boll, having watched that documentary. And I don't pretend to be an expert. This is all extrapolation, but I feel like I have a decent handle on the dude's approach to filmmaking at this point, just given what we've seen, what I've done, with the research I've done for this podcast. So Uwe has this idea that Americans are very much the snowflakes that the right wing says that we all are. This is something that he is very much a proponent of. He, as I mentioned last week, proudly stated the N-word in that documentary and was just like, I think everyone should be able to say it. And like, lot to unpack there. I don't think I'm qualified to do so, but what you can do is you can extract that and put it and basically just inject it into the veins of Postal, in which this is a movie where multiple times it felt like someone was trying to say something and then it just kind of said, just kidding, we're not saying anything and you can go fuck yourself. The part that really kind of stands out to me, and I'm gonna talk about this scene a little bit just because I kind of remember it, is when the two cops pull up behind a woman driving and she's not going through a light, and like the immediate setup is just racist, sexist, ageist bullshit, and it's bad and it's trashy. But for a minute there, like the cop gets out. The woman is Chinese, starts speaking Chinese at him. He doesn't understand and eventually gets frustrated, pulls out a gun and shoots her. And like my 2020 brain goes, oh my God, wait, is this like some sort of anti-police sentiment? Are we making a reference here? Like, is this trying to say something here? Because like that's almost poignant in a lot of ways, cops who are just impatient and just looking for the easy way out and like just pulling guns out and shooting people because they didn't understand or they made a mistake or whatever. I mean, mistake is the understatement of the century. Please understand what I am saying here. I thought this might be something. And then he gets back in the car and is like, I thought she called me the N-word, so I shot her. Which is a whole different subset of racist and just undermines anything that it might have been going for, and is basically how the rest of the movie plays itself, because everything else, there's like a couple seconds where I'm like, hang on a second, are we saying something here? Is this going to be something? And then Uwe comes in, punches you in the dick and goes, just kidding, fucko. It's not, nothing means anything. I'm clearly a nihilist, and this is like my opinion of video games, movies, of the world. It is the biggest, Postal is the ethos of Uwe Boll boiled down into a movie, and it fucking sucks.
I was thinking while I was watching this, it's like if Fight Club wasn't made by a real filmmaker. Fight Club is a movie that, especially in recent years, has a lot of criticism for its sort of philosophy and attitudes. And, again, as I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast, it bears repeating, though, that is the movie where, the term special snowflake comes from. So, obviously it's going to, it's going to be problematic, to say the least.
It's been tainted in recent years, or maybe it was always tainted and just has kind of come more to light now that we're not in the 90s where everything was perfect.
Yeah, and so the thing about Fight Club that, like, still makes me want to go back to it and, like, watch it someday is, like, that is at least, like, that is a movie by a filmmaker. Like, David Fincher's a real ass, like, fucking filmmaker. It's not just that it has, like, pretty, like, cinematography or, like, an exciting story or good pacing or any of that, although it has those things. It's that, like, at least the movie, and by extension the book, the source material that it comes from, which is less sort of criticized, because the problem that people have with Fight Club basically is that, in theory, Tyler Durden is supposed to be the villain and, like, emphasizing this sort of, like, toxic masculinity, nihilistic view of the world. But that the movie, by nature of being a movie, makes Tyler Durden look sexy, and his ideology looks sexy, whereas the book doesn't have that problem because, it's a book. So, like, that's a whole conversation about, like, presentation. But this is so clearly Uwe Boll just kind of, like, spewing id all over the screen, which is maybe what I found more interesting about it than Alone in the Dark, because at least I get the feeling from this that, like, okay, a human being made this, and do I especially care for this human being? No. But, like, somewhere in this thrashing, Uwe Boll is saying things that he cares about, and he's saying it in the worst possible way, which is what makes it unbearable.
But here's my case for why this sucks and Alone in the Dark was at least something, is that you watch 5 minutes of this and you understand everything that the movie is doing and where it's going and how it's going to. You basically get it. You get what it's doing, and if you've seen 5 minutes, you've seen the entire movie. With Alone in the Dark, you start off in the Indiana Jones chase, and then you turn into a weird, like, horror movie on a boat, and then you turn into a museum thing, and then you turn into a weird detective sci-fi FBI thing, and then it turns into a metal music video, and then it turns into a weird horror sci-fi thing again. It goes places that you might not expect it to go. It does things that change from the previous scene. Here, it's say a slur, shoot a person. Next scene, say a slur, shoot a person. Here's some boobs. Say a slur, shoot a person. Say a slur, shoot a person. What?
You play like Donkey Konga to your little song there. Use the GameCube bongos.
And that is what makes this movie just so unbearably boring for me. Here's listen, we're 25 minutes in. Half the people are going to have turned this off already because they've realized that it's nothing. This is nothing. This whole thing is nothing. I built furniture the entire time I watched this movie. When I watch movies for the podcast, I go out of my way to pay attention to them. When I play video games, like I tune everything else out. I'm like, I need to give this my all. This movie I watched for 5 minutes, said there's no way I'm going to get through this if I don't do something else, and I built furniture while I watched it, which is probably the only thing that prevented me from just turning it off and walking away.
At least you got your furniture built. I got a good workout. I was on the stationary bike while I watched this for similar reasons. I'm like, all right, there's not much that's gonna be going on here. So
no, it was absolute goddamn nothing. It was so nonsense.
I would also like to clarify, in case anyone was under the impression that I am, like, mounting the Postal Defense Force here. When we're comparing it to Alone in the Dark, this is like asking me if I think that, like, getting stabbed by, like, a giant katana or getting like crushed by like a crusher, like an industrial crusher, like turning me into goo, like which one would be worse? Like it's either way, both movies are a complete fucking waste of your time.
Somebody walks up to you and hands you two piles of dog shit. One's a little bit runnier, but one's a little bit like smaller. And you're like, which one is worse? And you go, I don't know. These both suck. Take them back. I want my 10 hours back.
Wait, 10 hours?
Okay, well, it might be more than that. Let me go through this, all right?
Oh, man, all right, here we go.
So, 2 hours for Alone in the Dark. We've got another, probably, let's say half an hour. Let's be generous and say half an hour for playing Alone in the Dark. Let's say another half an hour for additional research to an hour. We'll go an hour on that one. We'll say an hour of research of Alone in the Dark. We have watching an hour and a half to 2 hour movie about Uwe Boll. So that's about 6-ish hours there. An hour to record the podcast. 2 hours to edit the podcast. That's about 9 hours. And then today, I watched an hour and a half of that. That's about 10 and a half hours. I'm going to have to record this. Let's say we end it here. And then we end at half an hour. And then that's another half an hour that add an hour on at the end there. This is about 12 hours of Uwe Boll content that I just do not get back of my life.
Isn't that the real horror? Holy shit. Yeah, so I mean, what have we learned over the course of all this? Not all that much.
Don't listen to Tom.
Well, I guess that's true as well.
Although he did recommend Danganronpa to us, so
I mean, I think this is like the like Newton's third law in motion. I think. I guess, like, if we're talking about... I did not do nearly as much research on Uwe Boll, of course. I do not edit these, so I don't have to deal with that either. But I will say that, like, I feel like, from my own little position in this intersection of, like, video game enthusiast and like film buff, film critic, what have you, like, and for my own position, I cannot say that I super regret having done this, just because I feel like, I don't know, there's something to me about like this little point in time, this guy that like everyone like hated his fucking guts and like nobody cares about anymore, and for good reason. And that like for me, in terms of my like personal satisfaction, that's enough. I feel like I understand Uwe Boll. I feel like I understand the man. I feel like I understand the reaction to the man, and now I can move on. And if he ever comes up in conversation, and if anyone ever talks about like the worst films of all time, and his name comes up again, which it doesn't tend to anymore, but maybe it will. I will understand that conversation a little bit better, which is the best thing I could say about the Uwe Boll experience. But I'm perfectly comfortable never watching a single one of his films again.
See, I was in that place at the end of last week. Like, I was very much like, I like this. I'm happy that we did this. This was a good idea. I'm happy that, I was happy that I spent all that extra time researching things, because I felt like I had come away a better, wiser person, more aware of the culture of movies and how things shape out across the board. But you know how you keep filling a glass and then it overflows and spills, and then you just make a big mess and you're just mad and in a bad mood afterwards. Yeah, that's this week. That's what happened here. Too much Boll.
Too much Boll. Yeah. I mean, I can't recommend that anyone watch Postal for any reason. I mostly agree. I think that this feels like closing the book on Uwe Boll. Now that I've seen peak Uwe Boll, like I feel like I have the full spectrum of context surrounding him. Because Alone in the Dark, I still felt like something was missing after that. I was still like, I still don't quite get this, even though I think that conversation turned out very good. In no small part thanks to all the sacrifice and research that you did. But yeah, I'm comfortable letting this recording be the final word on Uwe Boll. He can go have his restaurant and hopefully never make a film again.
You know what's really stupid?
What?
I still want to watch one of his serious movies. I need to know. I do. Listen, we are not doing an episode on it. Do not ask us to. It's not happening. But I might do it in my personal time at some point, mostly because I am just deathly curious to know what the opposite of this is. Like, I just, now that I've seen peak nihilistic Uwe, what can Attack on Darfur be?
I mean, that's so I was talking about this a little bit. I suppose we can theory craft on Attack on Darfur for a bit, because I was talking to friend of the show Duncan about Uwe Boll, and I mentioned this was before I had seen that Postal won the poll, and he had brought up when I mentioned that people had actually acclaimed that movie, like some people. He had mentioned that might be a case where, like, basically by virtue of its subject matter, like, as long as you don't like be Uwe Boll, basically, you just like point a camera and like let your serious script like play out, then like you can probably get the kind of people who praise Attack on Darfur to praise Attack on Darfur. But like it's unfathomable to me, and this is why I'm a little bit with you here. I'm still a little bit curious about it, because it's unfathomable to me, especially after seeing this, that like even the minimum, like bog standard sort of serious drama, like you think your average boring drama that doesn't have anything that exceptional about it, how Uwe Boll resisted the temptation to Uwe Boll it up to even make that. I kind of refuse to believe it.
I gotta know. I really do gotta know. Because these two movies, two does not a pattern make, I will admit. But like, I got a good feeling about the rest of them. And I gotta know how this doesn't fit in.
Well, and especially because we went out of our way for these two to pick like peak Uwe Boll. Like, we picked Postal because, again, that's where a lot of the memes come from. That's the whole spirit of Uwe Boll, like, based on the documentary that you watch. It seemed to be in line. And we picked Alone in the Dark because it was his worst rated movie. And I feel like I am comfortable saying that I have seen enough to at least like make grand sweeping statements about his career at minimum. Except for Attack on Darfur is really the wrinkle in that, though. It's the only thing that I can't just completely write off at this point. like that Auschwitz movie. Like after seeing Postal, like exactly how that is.
Yeah, honestly.
But if people actually praise Attack on Darfur, then that's a different story. Again, even if it ends up just being a boring drama, that's still significant for Uwe Boll.
Especially, God, Auschwitz was made at the same time as Blood Rain 3 and Blubberella. What the fuck? I have so many questions. God, this man, every time I think I'm out, he brings me right back in. It's becoming a weird obsession, and I hate it. I want to not.
Well, I'm pretty comfortable calling it here. If this ends up being the destruction of Sean, I'll feel an immense amount of guilt for not having stopped it when I could, but only 20% guilt.
It's a podcast. It's a 2-person thing. Oh my God. All right. Do we want to call this fucking episode just not even spoilers? Like, fuck this, man. I don't know what the hell else we're going to talk about. Technically, it's been like 35 minutes ish at this point, and like, man, we've talked about Postal, huh?
I mean, like, what I've said here is basically the only thing of value that Postal made me think about, which makes me comfortable calling here. I mean, there's no point in, it's like you say, like the whole movie is exactly what you think it is from like the word go. The only remarkable thing about it is that not only does Uwe Boll cameo, that's not that remarkable, even if he is, kind of poking fun at himself. The creator of Postal also is involved, apparently. I didn't actually look up to see if that was him. I'm assuming it was, which I guess makes sense because this isn't like Alone in the Dark, where like Alone in the Dark is a serious horror game made to like genuinely spook people. I mean, Postal, the best thing you could say about Postal the film as an adaptation is that like it's not like the thing it's adapting was any more glorious, so like yeah, so that's like the only kind of weird thing, but there's not enough to like dig into. It's really it's a lot and it's nothing is true, everything is permitted.
Don't watch it. Just save yourself the headache. Don't watch Postal. I guarantee we're not the first people to say that. We won't be the last people to say it. We might be. He's gone. He's out. Uwe Boll is just no longer in the consciousness. We might be the last people to talk about Postal. Wouldn't that be just like a fucking blessing?
That is interesting. We very well may be, or if not us, like probably not long after. Like, how many people
we're on the back end of that bell curve for sure.
Yeah, like how many people are still like genuinely mad about Uwe Boll's like video game movies for like ruining video games or ruining movies or whatever? Like not really anybody. Anyone who watches Uwe Boll movies at this point is just mad that they wasted their fucking time doing so.
Promised memes, delivered nothing. Fuck Uwe Boll.
Yeah.
Listen though, we're done. Uwe Boll is over. We're not doing another week of this shit. What we can at least tell you is that Quarantine Classics is coming back next week. We're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. We talked a little bit about like Westerns in our Seventh Samurai episode. So we're going to actually like put our money where our mouth is and watch a Western movie. And hopefully I won't just yell about pits the entire time like we did last time we watched a Western movie.
It's funny. Like even outside of the show, I have independently been thinking about Westerns quite a bit because my mom and I finished watching The Mandalorian. I finally watched all that and enjoyed it a shocking amount that I didn't expect to. And so I think a lot of that was the Western influence. I'm down. I'm down for the good, the bad, and the ugly.
That's gonna do it for us. I've been Sean McKinda. I don't know, man. Find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda, Letterboxd, Sean McKinda, writing 25yearslater-site.com. Hopefully more places soon, fingers crossed. Jackson?
I'm Jackson Keller. I haven't been on Twitch and I haven't been on YouTube in a hot minute, but I have good reasons for it because I've been learning Japanese and I've been working out. I've lost like 10 pounds. And I feel great about it. I'm feeling good. Operation Reconstruction is going well. And now that I've learned stuff about myself and each other, we can come back to the content slurry known as YouTube and Twitch. So Jackson J. Keller on Twitch. Hit me up.
Follow the podcast on Twitter at BDH_cast. We'll post polls. We'll post updates on episodes if we get delayed or something like that. If you want to talk to us directly, the best place to do so is at our Discord, which you can get access to over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/BDHcast. $1 a month gets you access to our Discord where you can yell at us directly. $5 gets you access to the Discord and our backlog of bonus episodes. We got a bunch of great ones. We got some interesting stuff coming up here. We're going to do our first book-based bonus episode in about a week now, so pay attention for that one. And $10 gets you access to everything I've said before and the ability to request bonus episodes and a little something.
Thank you so much, Julia, Travis, Mom, Aunt Summer, and Pat. Y'all are great. Donkey Kong Jungle Beat.
Thanks to Loads of Highway for the use of our theme song, a suicide alternate take off the High Octane Low Expectations. You cannot find it on Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, but you can find it pretty much anywhere else you can find music, whether you want to stream it or whether you want to buy their album. Just support them however you can. They're a great band, and they're wonderful for letting us use their music. Also, thanks to 25 Years Later site.com. You can get a little button in the corner of their site, but you should go read all the stuff that they've done. They've got a bunch of really talented people doing a bunch of really talented writing that you should definitely check out. Normally I'd say next week we're talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly here, but I did that 3 minutes ago, so it feels kind of redundant, but I did it anyway now, didn't I?
My man managed to make a bit out of calling attention to his own bit. If it's a bit, you must commit. That's how we do it here.
Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go